Everybody who matters is here. We can get started. Good afternoon. I want to welcome the representatives of the New York City Regional Economic Development Council. Thank you for coming in today. I'm Rosanna Rosado, New York Secretary of State, and I have the privilege of chairing the Strategic Implementation Assessment Team. I want to acknowledge the co-chairs, Winston Fisher, partner at Fisher Brothers. He became co-chair in 2015, and Cheryl Moore, President and Chief Operating Officer of the New York Genome Center, who has been a co-chair since 2016. Thank you for your leadership. It's also good to see all of you again and to hear what your plans are for next year. As I said to Ken Knuckles earlier, there are only 7 weeks left in this year. Let's make them count. So let me introduce my colleagues on the Siat, starting with Commissioner Richard Ball of Ag and Markets, Alicia Barton, President and CEO of NYSERDA, Roanda Stito, Commissioner of OGS, Eric Kulisade, Commissioner of the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. We have with us Brian Stratton, Director of Canals, Ruth Ann Wisnowski, Commissioner of Homes and Community Renewal. We have with us Senator Anna Kaplan from District 7 on Long Island. Did I say something wrong? You skipped over me again. I don't know. It's a mental thing. I always skip Roberta. Commissioner Roberta Reardon of Department of Labor, Senator Anna Kaplan, and Assemblywoman Donna Lupardo are with us. No, I was going to do a big drum roll at the end and introduce Roberta Reardon. New York City REDC, you have 45 minutes, and then we have very, very tough questions for you. You're on.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Cheryl Moore. Can you hear me? Is the mic on?
No.
Okay, hang on.
Just pull it closer to you.
Yep. Can you hear me now? No.
It's not turned on.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. Great. On behalf of the New York City Regional Economic Development Council and my co-chair, Winston Fisher, who unfortunately couldn't be here with us today, we'd like to thank you, the members of the Strategic Implementation Assessment Team, for your review of our progress to date and for our plans going forward into 2020. Joining us for our presentation today are 3 council members, Ken Knuckles, Kinda Yunus, and Kathy Wild. So you can see you have to have a name that starts with K. We're also honored to have with us Linda Barron, who's President and CEO of the Staten Island Chamber of Commerce, who's here to discuss our Downtown Revitalization Initiative winner, which is Downtown Staten Island. And also Brian Coleman, CEO of Greenpoint Manufacturing Design Center, who will discuss the new project in Ozone Park, Queens, a Round 6 priority project that's being supported by a $2.1 million ESD grant. And now, to kick us off, we'd like to share with you a short video.
The New York City economy is incredibly diverse. So there's a whole host of different industries.
The diversity of the economy, I think, enables a broader cross-section of our community, including low and moderate income communities, to have opportunities for employment.
So the REDC has wonderful outreach to a whole plethora of different projects.
But in particular, we're interested in providing resources to underserved communities. When we can help all New Yorkers take a step up, those who are underemployed or not employed, we're advancing the economy broadly.
New York City's seen 80% growth in tech jobs in the last 10 years.
It's a perfect time to grow in this technology sector. At Voice Technologies, we design and manufacture life safety, security, and communications equipment. Since moving into this building, not just adding 100,000 square feet, but we've more than doubled our workforce, and in the next 18 months expect to even do that again. Having the grant allowed us to buy equipment that keeps us on the cutting edge.
These investments allow people sometimes to get their first job or their first good paying job.
Everybody has to be invested in the city, especially people who are the most vulnerable. Its sole focuses on 3 areas: moving young people away from the criminal justice system, ensuring that they make academic progression, and that they are employable. The investment was for this space. We were serving in our much smaller space 150 young people, then 180. This year was slated to serve 432 brand new young people.
We prioritize workforce development projects. We look at projects that are stimulative for particular communities.
Empire Outlets is located on the North Shore of Staten Island. This project will create 1,200 jobs. We're about halfway there right now. Probably half of those who are employed right now come from the North Shore and from the program that we set up. It's just important to us that when we make that kind of an investment, that it ripples as far beyond the actual bricks and mortar as possible.
Programs like this are important because they target businesses that can make an impact, and then they pick the neighborhoods that need that impact. For example, Great Performances coming to the South Bronx, to Mott Haven. Well, it's kind of a perfect match. Great Performances is a catering company. We started as a waitress service for women in the arts. Artists are part of the fabric of New York City, so keeping them working is very important. Our grant is just shy of $900,000, and it is earmarked for the build-out of our kitchen. Our space has almost doubled. That's a lot more space, it's a lot more food, a lot more people.
I think when you look at all the projects that the RADC has funded, you notice that each one of them, they end up being this incredible catalyst for exponential economic growth.
So over the past 8 years, we have funded over 750 projects, and that's created more than 37,000 jobs for New Yorkers.
This impact goes right back into these local communities. The state recognized that. That's pretty impressive.
Less than 5% of our young people are reconvicted of a crime. 95% of our youth are making academic progression, and all of them, through our internship model, are employable at this point. When our EDC decides to invest in people, in community, you literally are creating different pathways.
You're investing in the people who are working here, but you're investing into the people they're reaching out to. You're investing in our future.
For people to believe in these programs, they can come here and they can see what that grant did, a way to jumpstart this company into a growth that is unprecedented.
The state's investment and RADC's investment was critical. We could not have done this project without it.
We're so lucky to have this funding so that we can make a difference here in the city to the people that really need it, and to spread the growth, spread the power of economic growth to all the communities, all the boroughs.
And the RADC is filling a tremendous need today to help New York City remain competitive and the engine of the world.
The strength of New York City's economy is evident through many different measures. Economic output is up 46% since 2011. Unemployment is at a historic low of 4.2%. New York City continues to benefit from the forces of globalization and the technical revolution, which attract talent, especially young people, to the cities. Still, the city faces ongoing fiscal and economic challenges. Economic outcomes for city residents continue to be strongly influenced by race, gender, and family income level. Our educational institutions need to be better connected to the city's employers to ensure that students are prepared for the most in-demand jobs. The high cost of housing is a persistent burden for many, including middle-income families. And last, although the city's economy is strong, the threat of a recession is causing businesses to revise growth projections, tighten hiring, and to invest less in growth strategies. With these challenges in mind, our council has developed a strategic plan and priorities to for project selection that focus on inclusive economic growth and delivering resources to the communities that are most in need. We continue to support the expansion of commercial activity, job creation, workforce development, and affordable housing. Today, our panel will present a brief summary of our progress in rounds 1 through 8 and our priorities for the coming year. Ken's going to now kick us off with a summary of the 2019 progress report.
Thank you, Cheryl. In support of Governor Cuomo's 2019 priorities, our council has continued its efforts to promote the CFA process and encourage applications from across New York City. We worked with representatives from life science companies, workforce development groups, universities, state and local elected officials, early stage businesses and incubators, tourism and cultural organizations, and other nonprofits to spread the word and build a robust pipeline. This year we held CFA workshops in Brooklyn and Manhattan, and 3 CFA info sessions in Queens, the Bronx, and Staten Island. We also held a public forum in July to showcase possible priority projects and heard from 22 project sponsors. Our efforts have indeed paid dividends. The council received a total of 307 finalized applications, including 103 applications from those participating in the CFA process for the first time, and 81 from applicants with an interest in supporting veterans. Over the first 8 rounds of the REDC initiative, the New York City region has been awarded over $549 million to assist 751 projects. 81% of our awarded projects are either complete or on schedule. These represent a total investment, including private and public dollars, of over $4.3 billion, and a leverage ratio of state grants and tax credits of nearly 14-to-1. Most importantly, these projects will create and retain over 37,000 permanent jobs. If we focus on our 65 active ESD capital priority projects, these represent a total investment, both public and private, of over $3 billion and a leverage ratio of state funding of 24-to-1. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Now I'd like to ask Kinda to share the status of several priority projects from the past and to report on progress on rounds 1, 2, and 3 of the Downtown Revitalization Initiative.
Thank you, Cheryl. We achieved important milestones on several of our priority projects this year, including ribbon cuttings for the Empire Outlets and Exalt 2's projects that were referenced in our video. Last May, Lieutenant Governor Hochul attended a groundbreaking at the former Tasty Bakery in West Harlem, which is being redeveloped into a mixed-use building with 350,000 square feet of commercial space, fully adaptable to life science tenants, a nonprofit community facility, retail space, and capacity for 440 new jobs. The new Tasty Lab building was awarded a $10 million ESD grant in round 1. In September, the Lieutenant Governor also attended a groundbreaking for nanotronics imaging, which combines artificial intelligence, automation, and imaging for industrial inspection. The company will open a technology hub at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, creating 190 new jobs and investing $11 million over the next 5 years. The company was awarded a $2.25 million round 7 ESD capital grant and is also being admitted into the Startup New York program. And in October, Henry Street Settlement held a grand opening for its new neighborhood resource center, which is located in a converted historic firehouse on the Lower East Side. The new facility houses Henry Street Settlement's workforce development programs that place more than 600 low-income people in jobs each year. The nonprofit was awarded $1 million in ESD grant assistance in round 6.
Thank you, Kinda.
Similarly,
sorry.
I also do I'll give a quick update on the Downtown Revitalization Initiative projects. They are progressing on schedule. Downtown Jamaica was selected as the winner of the $10 million DRI Round 1 award for New York City. 7 projects were selected for investment that will activate key gateways into Jamaica, promote local entrepreneurship and career development, and expand broadband access for area residents, businesses, and visitors. These 7 projects are all either completed or well underway. An area of the South Bronx, known as the Bronx Civic Center, was selected as the winner of the DRI Round 2 grant. Dramatic grassroots and community-driven transformation efforts have resulted in population and job growth in these neighborhoods that are outpacing the rest of the city. The South Bronx is also booming with private and public investments in affordable housing, cultural facilities, retail, and other sectors. 12 competitive projects were selected for DRI investment that will draw on the South Bronx's proud history as a cultural, educational, retail, and employment hub to develop a unified downtown, enhance the quality of life for residents and visitors through support of cultural, artistic, and recreational spaces, and expand low-cost broadband access to support economic growth and opportunity. All 12 of these projects are well underway. And for the Downtown Revitalization Initiative 3 grant, it's Downtown Brooklyn that was announced as the winner. It is the borough's central business district, as well as its civic, cultural, transit, and employment hub. And it has become an urban center for the information technology, arts, and entertainment industries. It was announced this past August that the state will invest in 6 projects to 1, improve streetscapes and pedestrian safety to reconnect the communities surrounding the Brooklyn Navy Yard with downtown Brooklyn. 2, extend educational and entrepreneurial opportunities by transforming a branch of the Brooklyn Public Library into a modern community hub and creating a digital tech center at a NYCHA community center. And 3, link the cultural hubs of the downtown core with local artists and cultural organizations by establishing a grant program focused on public art, placemaking, and cultural access. These projects are now in the contracting stage with ESD, HCR, and DOS. Thank you.
Thank you, Kinda, and sorry for interrupting. Next, Kathy Wild from the Partnership for New York City will present New York City's vision for new 2019 priorities in expanding childcare and economic and environmental justice, and then provide an update on our workforce development agenda.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thanks for the opportunity. The Governor's priorities this year for us to take a focus on to look at planning and how we could recommend to the state programmatic activities going forward were in child care and environmental justice. With regard to child care, we put together a council of experts in child care education, training, workforce development to discuss the needs of both children and their parents and how those could be coordinated. Based on our outreach and research, the Council is recommending a series of strategies to focus on child care availability and support for parents. First, to understand what child care is available, the distribution of existing services, and mapping that by location. It is our observation that services are uneven in terms of their availability, particularly in low-income communities, and that's something that we think we need to study and recommend results for. There are also underutilized slots in various supported daycare settings that we should figure out how to enhance that utilization, looking at both homes as well as work sites of parents. There's considerable variety in the quality of child care services available, and there has to be some uniform assessment of quality as well as location. Finally, in order to help streamline information, we think there needs to be a much better communication system between sources of services and the parents, et cetera, perhaps working through settlement houses and other community nonprofit groups, as well as having an online presence for that activity. We suggest targeting policies in particularly toward working parents or parents who are in various training programs that are associated with the state's workforce development programs, and also dealing with the challenge with the city is rolling out has rolled out pre-K, now 3K, and that means that more and more of the children that are in assisted daycare are of a very young age, which is much more expensive, requires much more training, and we need to look carefully at how we're dealing with those new and expanded demands that will come from care increasingly that's being provided through child care going to very young children. We think the private sector can be an important resource in this regard, and we're reaching out to the business community to get their ideas and priorities on models for child care and how they might better serve parents. In the CFA funding round, we've been able to fund a couple of projects that will hopefully provide models for serving this need. One, St. Nick's Alliance, a Brooklyn Community Development Corporation, well established, is putting together a school settlement building that will basically enhance their service to preschool and school-aged children. The project will cost $23.3 million, and that's one of the projects we're recommending funding for. Another is Queens Community House, which has after-school programs, high school internships, and is seeking funding of $7 million to renovate their Forest Hills Community Center, which obviously serves a very important community, set of communities in Queens. Will provide 85 new jobs. And a new family and well-being center, the Lower East Side Girls Club, which again is educational programming and, importantly, training, safe sitter training program that provides training for nannies, babysitters, first aid, and other care services. Digital Girl is going into another state-funded project at the Bedford Union Armory in Crown Heights. This space will include, it's not me. Will include a technology lab, classroom space, and support for after-school programs. So that's on the child care front. As you know, this year we were not funded to do this work. It was particularly planning work, but we hope that some of the ideas we come up with will suggest funding for next year. Are you sure it's not me? The second area in terms of economic and environmental justice, this is obviously involved looking closely at the areas where the state is investing and where we're recommending economic development, housing, and other investments, and looking at how those areas and those investments can maximize both job growth development in the green economy and also deal with environmental justice issues. We will convene information sessions in communities where investments are being made and consult with these communities about project funding and how to maximize opportunities for a win-win with both economic development and environmental justice. Greater Jamaica Development Corporation, which serves an area which was historically had a lot of contaminated sites and a lot of environmental issues, is redeveloping 3 industrial underutilized properties in Queens to offer affordable spaces for small batch and traditional manufacturing. This is a $19.8 million project. Renovations will include installation of solar panels and a green roof and result in at least 67 new manufacturing jobs. Staten Island, Northfield Community LDC is advancing recommendations of the Port Richmond Brownfield Opportunity Area. This is a study that's going to recommend a cleanup plan, preliminary design work for affordable housing on the site, and maritime workforce needs assessment. We're recommending this be funded. Finally, the ongoing efforts in workforce development. In New York State, we have 750,000 unfilled job postings online on any day, 300,000 at least in New York City. And so clearly our challenge in New York, as our unemployment rate is reaching an all-time low, we have a skills gap that we have to focus on filling. We have worked closely with the Office of Madre Camaretti and her efforts to start this new workforce development initiative, and also with the Department of Labor under Roberta Reardon's leadership as they embark on new apprenticeship programs and on expanding their services for training people for the new economy, the innovation economy, where the big gaps exist. We have a council within the Regional Council of experts in the workforce development area that is promoting workforce development as a critical part of all our project funding. In addition to Digital Girl, project I mentioned earlier. The Emerald Isle Immigration Center is another area that originally served new Irish immigrants, now serves everybody. Emerald Isle is requesting support to renovate a facility to provide continue their training for new immigrants in the Bronx. And we're also supporting a number of new apprenticeship programs. Importantly, the requirement and the priority that we're putting is that there be private sector permanent employment offers as part of every workforce development and training program. This is really a new approach, but we're no longer, but we're being strict on that on the projects that we recommend for funding for the State Economic Development Program and for any workforce training and workforce development programs, that there has to be a commitment of the end game being jobs. And we're working with CUNY on the same thing to help provide training, educational support, because the whole interface between academic education and job training are more important than ever today. Finally, we are planning additional outreach programs to continue to support the workforce. We ran in August a major event partnering with the Workforce Development Institute, the New York City Employment and Training Coalition, and the New York Association of Training and Employment Professionals, and we plan to continue this kind of outreach. This one was held at the Genome Center. There were 186 attendees, mostly from the workforce development and education communities, and we're trying to support their efforts. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy. Turning now to our life sciences cluster plan, the sector has dramatically expanded since the appropriation of the governor's $620 million initiative. Development includes 3 new incubators or accelerator facilities and several new city programs. This includes an early-stage life sciences funding initiative for companies, funds for life sciences expansion space, and an internship program for college students with majors in science or business. We expect to grow life sciences space by an additional 300,000 square feet within the next few years, partly due to Deerfield Management's recent decision to build a $635 million new life sciences campus on Park Avenue in Manhattan. The investments have begun to pay off by generating private sector funding as well. New York State received 30 cents in life sciences venture funding for every dollar of NIH funding in 2018. That's up from 3 cents in 2014. So a huge success. In addition, since 2015, New York City-based life sciences companies have raised over $650 million in venture funding. During this time, the Council has continued to support the development and expansion of life sciences companies that will have a measurable impact on the sector. In 2017, Governor Cuomo granted $17 million to the New York Genome Center to build infrastructure to support Johnson & Johnson Innovation's J-Labs incubator program. Since its launch in June of last year, the incubator is already home to 31 life sciences companies. Also this year, a Cambridge, Massachusetts-based life sciences business incubator called BioLabs at NYU Langone opened in Lower Manhattan with the assistance of a $2 million ESD capital grant through the RADC initiative. For Round 9, we're recommending capital funding for the New York Stem Cell Foundation, which will expand its existing state-of-the-art stem cell research and automation infrastructure within the Hudson Research Center. This will be at a cost of $13 million and add 40 new jobs. And also Terra Biosystems, which is a biotech company based in the Alexandria Center for Life Sciences that focuses on cardiac tissue models used to test new treatment protocols. The company plans to expand and purchase new lab equipment, retaining 15 existing jobs and creating 75 new jobs. Now Ken will present our other 2019 priority projects, and right after that, Kinda will discuss DRI Round 9 and introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you, Cheryl. In addition to projects supporting child care, economic and environmental justice, life sciences, and workforce development, we're also excited about a number of other 2019 priority projects that focus on community investment in downtown revitalization and placemaking. The American Museum of Natural History is one such project, which is requesting funding to support the development of a permanent butterfly vivarium to be a major attraction within the Richard Gilder Center for Science Education and Innovation. This is a $2.25 million project, which is expected to be completed by the end of 2022. Friends of the High Line, which has been such a great success in New York City, is seeking funding to renovate at a cost of $10 million the Western Rail Yards, which would be the last section of the High Line park that extends west along 30th Street and north to 34th Street. This section will be refurbished with a paved walkway, a new power utility infrastructure, and lighting. Greenwood Cemetery's popularity in the 1800s helped to inspire the creation of public parks, including Central Park and Prospect Park. Greenwood will construct at a cost of $34.2 million, a 19,000 square foot education and welcome center directly across the street from the cemetery's main gate. And it will include a reception area, a gallery, a research center, and library, and a flexible education space and offices. Incidentally, we always consider Greenwood Cemetery to be a shovel-ready project. I couldn't resist, I'm sorry. The New York Historical Society will launch a 5-year project to construct a 65,000 square foot annex to its museum that will house expansive new public galleries and serve as the home for its new Academy for American Democracy, a civics learning laboratory for 6th grade students and teachers from the city's public schools. It's a $107 million project, and it's estimated to attract 100,000 additional visitors to the museum each day. The Universal Hip Hop Museum, which would be in the Bronx, the birthplace of hip hop, it would be the first museum dedicated to the preservation and celebration of the hip hop history and culture. It will create educational and entertainment experiences as well as incorporate an in-house museum jobs training program. This $30 million project will bring a compelling tourism destination to Concourse Village in the Bronx, and it is expected to create 100 new jobs. The Greenpoint Manufacturing Design Center, which has been a mainstay in maintaining manufacturing in New York City. It's a nonprofit developer of industrial space for small and mid-sized local manufacturing and artisans, and it's partnering with The Bridge to create a multi-tenanted center for small-scale manufacturing in Brownsville, Brooklyn, which is in East New York. It's a part of a larger mixed-use development. Once complete, the 40,000 square foot facility will provide long-term space for approximately 10 small manufacturing businesses and 35 new jobs and 59 construction jobs. Construction will begin in June of 2020 with planned completion by August 2022. And to mention again the Emerald Isle Immigration Center, which Kathy mentioned earlier. To conclude our discussion on our 2019 priority projects, I'd like to note that our progress report recommends 18 priority projects from ESD's Capital Fund to advance the growth objectives of the state and our region. These capital projects represent a total proposed state investment of more than $23 million, leveraging over $304 million in private and other funding at an investment ratio of over 13-to-1. Collectively, these projects will support the retention and creation of nearly 4,164 full-time jobs and the creation of 1,700 construction jobs. Thank you.
We're pleased with the designation of downtown Staten Island for round 4 of the Governor's DRI initiative. Both Ken and I serve as co-chairs of the DRI committee. The council conducted a wide-ranging outreach and nomination process to solicit applications for the DRI. The 5 borough president offices worked with community boards, universities, local business improvement districts, and local economic development organizations to identify candidate downtown locations, resulting in proposals from 6 DRI applicants: Southwest Bronx, the Coney Island Amusement District in Brooklyn, Long Island City in Queens, East Harlem in Manhattan, Penn Station and the Garment District in Manhattan, and downtown Staten Island. After careful review by our DRI committee, the Council's Executive Committee nominated downtown Staten Island for the DRI designation, as it was the area best positioned to be transformed and leveraged by the $10 million DRI grant. Downtown Staten Island is experiencing substantial growth, and several major catalytic projects are either complete or nearing completion. Investments in downtown Staten Island will have lasting positive impacts beyond the downtown area. I'd like to now introduce Linda Barron, President and CEO of the Staten Island Chamber of Commerce.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me today. Really excited about the downtown Staten Island DRI appointment.
Can you put it closer? Sure.
Downtown Staten Island is the gateway to Staten Island through St. George Ferry Terminal and the Bay Street Corridor, and it is a critical civic, business, and cultural hub that serves the entire borough. The area is anchored by historic St. George, an active civic center with 31,000 residents, 4,000 daily workers, 5,000 daily tourists, and over 70,000 daily ferry passengers a year come to Staten Island. The area has experienced renaissance, currently undergoing a $1 billion redevelopment thanks to both public and private partnerships in the area. New York State is investing a combined $85.6 million in two large mixed-use projects in downtown Staten Island. Empire Outlets, which celebrated its grand openings on May 16th of 2019, and Lighthouse Point, which will open in early 2020. These two projects will create a total of 1,653 full-time jobs. In addition, as a result of the Bay Street Harbor Neighborhood Plan, the area is actually going to be rezoned. New York City has also agreed to invest $31.2 million in transit and open space upgrades in the area. The New York City EDC has announced a $120 million project to construct a 12-acre publicly accessible esplanade along the Stapleton waterfront, improving the shoreline in Tompkinsville and establishing a continuous public waterfront access from the ferry terminal to Edgewater Plaza. Over a dozen critically important social, cultural, and community destinations are within the downtown Staten Island, including the Richmond County Bank Ballpark, the historic St. George Theater, the National Lighthouse Museum, and smaller establishments that have opened up in the last couple of years, 50/50 Skate Park, and our first craft brewery, the Flagship Brewery, located on Minthorn Street, which was an investment of a private developer on Staten Island. The goals of this project, it lacks master planning and connectivity, so despite its recent success, downtown has suffered in terms of let me just go back. The downtown area in Staten Island really kind of lapsed into tough times because of the Verrazano Bridge and all of the development going south. So this area, now that there's been so much attention and there's been so much investment, it's really ripe for change. With targeted capital investments and infrastructure improvements, along with the oversight of the Business Improvement District that my organization is currently working on, downtown Staten Island can really capitalize on existing momentum and fully realize its potential and become New York City's premier commercial district. DRI investment is in the opportunities identified by local stakeholders along the Bay Street Corridor, runs from the Staten Island Ferry Terminal to the rapidly developing Stapleton waterfront, will build upon the momentum of recent catalytic developments in the proposed DRI area, and will complement the already announced significant investments in infrastructure, open space, and transit improvement. Some of the proposed projects that we'd like to see are the establishment of College of Staten Island Innovative District. The College of Staten Island for a long time was located mid-island. They opened a campus in St. George recently, and they are looking to make that more of an innovative hub. For example, they are going to incorporate virtual reality, augmented reality lab into the CSI Tech Incubator to expand its existing programs. It could force a tech startup ecosystem in downtown Staten Island. Streetscape improvements along Richmond Terrace, Bay Street, and Central Avenue, and connector streets from Bay Street to Front Street. Streetscape improvements have been identified as a crucial economic revitalization strategy for downtown Staten Island to support more efficient and safer pedestrian circulation, placemaking, and wayfinding to the area's cultural and commercial destinations. Capital improvement to the Richmond County Surrogate Court, the great entrance stairway at the courthouse needs capital improvement. Government beautification, the historic fountains at the Staten Island government offices need improvement and repair, as well as beautification efforts such as colored lighting, enhanced Richmond Terrace. Strategic pedestrian crossings on Richmond Terrace. The intersection of Richmond Terrace and the ferry terminal viaduct is a very important area, as it is the entryway to downtown Staten Island for ferry riders. However, the portion of St. George, both streetscape and pedestrian circulation improvements, intersection of Bay Street and Victory Boulevard on Staten Island, that's a very difficult area to navigate. Improvements to the bus viaduct at the ferry terminal, also ferry terminal uphill connections. The topography, it's very difficult to navigate and get around. So some of the capital improvements to improve the pedestrian activity along these streets will improve the sidewalks, crosswalks, and promote outdoor cafes. Business improvement fund facade improvements along Richmond Terrace, Bay Street, and Central Avenue. Smaller businesses that would be able to take advantage of facade improvements. Lighthouse Point restoration. Also the National Lighthouse Museum improvements. Our historic St. George Theater restoration. Looking at punching through some finger streets that are in the area to make some of the Bay Street corridor more accessible. Also, new public plaza at Victory Boulevard and improvements to Tappan Park. There's a lot of different targeted investment put into this application, and as I said, this area is really turning around, and all of this money will really help us fully capitalize the investment that's being done there, leverage that to improve the area, to make this one of the most fabulous. If you've ever been down there, the views that we have in downtown Staten Island are phenomenal, and with the governor's support, we think this area can become extremely vibrant and outstanding. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda. Brian Coleman of Greenpoint Manufacturing Design Center will now provide an update on an exciting industrial project in Ozone Park, Queens, which provides space for local and mid-sized manufacturing and artisan businesses. This priority project is receiving $2.1 million in ESD grant assistance, which was awarded in round 6.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today. I wanted to talk a little about who GMDC is, and then I'll get into our latest project in Ozone Park. My name is Brian Coleman. I've been fortunate for the last 16 years to run the Greenpoint Manufacturing Design Center, GMDC. We're a nonprofit developer of industrial space. We've developed almost 700,000 square feet of industrial space in Brooklyn, and now our latest project in Queens, New York. We own, manage, and develop industrial space to keep small manufacturers in New York City. And you might say that manufacturing isn't really thriving in New York City, not at the scale it once was. And a lot of us envision maybe the Brooklyn Navy Yard in its heyday with a couple of thousand people exiting the facility with lunch pails. It's a different type of manufacturing. It's small, artisanal, custom, usually making a premium product for a premium market. We often joke that we couldn't shop at many of our shops that are in our building because the product they create is so high-end. It's going to a very select audience. But we're happy about that because these shops employ people, and they employ people at good wages. The average salary of one of the jobs in our building is almost $51,000. When you compare that to retail and service sector work that is in the 20s and 30s, manufacturing jobs, though there are many fewer than they once were, are still good jobs. We have almost 600 people working in our building, so that's a significant number to us. This next slide is kind of interesting. What we do every 3 years is an extensive survey of our tenants, of the manufacturers, and we find out where their employees live, and we map them by zip code. And you can see here the heavy concentration of employees around those stars, which are our existing facilities. Our newest project is in Queens. It's not on this map. And so what we're doing is creating local jobs for local people. Over the years, we've had great success in raising funds with the capital funds with the New York City Council. And one of the reasons we're able to do that is because we could literally show people where their employees of the businesses who work in our buildings, where they come from. I wanted to be very thankful for the $2.1 million that the state has granted to this project, but the state actually has a larger footprint in this project than the $2.1 million. We have a 75 kW solar array on the roof of the building, and the state has subsidized the solar array. In addition, we used federal and state historic tax funds. So we were using historic tax credits, and the state is certainly, we benefited from that state program also. This is a project in Ozone Park, Queens. Quite frankly, not an area of Queens or New York City that's probably received much attention in a long time. It's an entire city block. It's a former bicycle factory that moved to South Carolina. It was in really bad shape when we purchased it for almost $15 million, and we've done $15 million worth of construction. We're literally just finishing up. Our groundbreaking is next month. This is the largest project that we've ever done. It was almost $42 million in total. It's 85,000 square feet. We had 80 construction jobs during construction, and we'll have between 85 and 100 permanent jobs when the building is fully leased. We just signed our first 4 leases. We have a few woodworkers, a print cartridge remanufacturer, and a jewelry maker. Here's the new solar array that I mentioned. This is important. This is important work. Right now, manufacturers have a hard time staying in New York City, even if they want to. There's great pressure on the market. Maybe 10 or 15 years ago when I came to GMDC, it was through conversions, illegal and legal, of industrial space into residences. Now we compete with big box retail. We compete with mini storage, and we're also now competing. Our latest competitor is kind of logistics. Everyone wants to get things delivered the next day, so there's manufacturing space like this is greatly coveted by just-in-time delivery. So it's hard to do this. It's hard to site this. Building is a little bit away from where we normally are. Just to give you an idea, this is about 10 minutes from Kennedy Airport, not far from Aqueduct Racetrack also. You can actually see that from the roof, just off the intersection of Woodhaven Boulevard and Atlantic Avenue. This is the entire site. It's 3 buildings. The 3-story building is the historic building. It's one of the first examples of poured concrete construction that we see now, and it's so common. That's the reason we were able to utilize the historic tax credits, both the state and the federal. There's a 1-story, 3,000 square foot office, and then a later 1970s era 1-story building that's on your right-hand side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. In closing, over the past 8 years, the Council has built broad consensus around the strategies, priorities, and values that will make our city stronger, more vibrant, and more inclusive. New York City is the state's primary economic engine, which attracts talent and investment from around the world. The city's continued success is critical not only to the state's economic health, but also to the global economic clout of the entire country. We've embraced the innovation economy while also ensuring that economically distressed communities have the opportunity to fully participate in it. We've focused on projects that will spur job creation and economic development to advance the governor's focus on increasing availability of affordable, high-quality childcare, the governor's commitment to ensuring that strong environmental justice policies influence economic development efforts, community investment in downtown revitalization and placemaking, and programs addressing skills gaps, and to support the governor's workforce development initiative. Moving smart, forward-thinking economic development projects forward and ensuring that all New Yorkers are prepared to participate in a growing and changing economy are the key objectives of the RADC initiative. Our council is energized and committed to deliver on those objectives. As a council, we've worked to implement the governor's vision for economic development in New York City. We're proud of our accomplishments and hope to be named a top performer this year. Thank you, and we look forward to answering your questions.
Good job. Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for sharing the GMDC story. It really is inspirational. I am going to call on my beloved Commissioner of Labor, Roberta Reardon, for the first question.
Thank you very much. What an exciting presentation. Full disclosure, I live in New York City, so I'm a little partial, but seriously, I mean, you've done amazing work, and it really is exciting to hear all the various outlines of work. The manufacturing center in Queens is really remarkable. The fact that you can actually do that in New York City is pretty amazing. I know people who are small manufacturers, and it's like finding gold when they can find space. So thank you for doing that. You've talked a lot about workforce development, which near and dear to my heart. One of the things that's really striking to me in New York City's numbers, so 80% growth in tech jobs in the last 10 years. That's just exploded. So it's huge. 300,000 unfilled jobs in New York City, so there's a skills gap. I'm sure many of those are tech jobs. We have 57% of the people living in poverty in the state live in New York City, which obviously puts a tremendous amount of pressure on those families and on the city. And yet only 47% of our high school graduates are college ready. There seems to be this enormous miss. And I know I'm speaking to the choir. I know you're all well aware of it. But how do we begin? What strategies are we using to line up the explosion in these tech jobs, which are often very, very good jobs, but open to anybody regardless of where they came from if they get the right kind of start, the poverty levels and the low college readiness? What are we doing in New York City?
The biggest challenge we have is a generation gap, because the tech jobs require starting very young. We've got a program, Computer Science for All, that ideally in the next couple of years will mean that every kid from kindergarten through high school will have at least one computer data science class per year, and that we're in the process of training 5,000 teachers to be able to do that. And that is a city public-private partnership project. That's an example. There are lots of other smaller projects that are training, but we have missed a generation, because this should have started 2 decades ago, and it did not. So that's the truth. What we're trying to do now is look at what can we do, particularly with the community colleges and the public universities, where we've got between matriculated students and others, and professional studies students. We've got 400,000 students who are in school and who should also be getting work experience as part-time jobs. That's the focus that we're taking. I know you're focusing on that same set of issues at the Department of Labor, and we're hoping that that will begin to close that gap by giving those students an opportunity. As you know, the percent of students, particularly in community colleges, that finish their degree is small.
Yeah.
And if we can provide them with work experience and job opportunities while they're in school, we hope to increase that. So those are some of the things that we're working on and talking about doing.
Thank you. The generational aspect is really critical. I thank you for identifying it that way, because most people don't. And just I know that throughout this report you've talked about opportunities and internships and exposure to other kinds of work, and I think that is so critical. Thank you.
Commissioner Ball, do you have a question?
How are we doing? Are we on? My technical advisor here. So you got the farmer in the room here, but thank you. Great presentation. Full disclosure, I've been to New York City. Actually, we're in New York City quite often, and whenever I talk about New York City, I think about our office in Brooklyn. We have an office there at the department. And I think about the conversation I had with the governor. You know, we have an amazing marketplace, the most diverse marketplace anywhere in the world in New York City. But we have one of the greatest agricultural communities upstate anywhere in the country. And so his conversation with me was about how do we connect the dots in a better way. So we're growing almost an acre for every person in New York City today, upstate New York. And one of the things we've spent quite a bit of time working on is getting good food from New York into New York City. And a couple issues there. We have understanding the marketplace. We have figuring out how the logistics work in the city, obviously, and navigating your school system, and looking for access for people who don't have access to all the food that we grow. So I'm particularly interested in how we connect. We've got about 31,000 people per square mile in the Bronx, for example, but we don't have grocery stores. We don't have all the food systems there to get them the kind of stuff that we grow. We've got a great partnership in New York City School Food, but I'm kind of drawn back to what my colleague from the Department of Labor was asking about, and workforce. That seems to be the theme here in a very big way, that everywhere we go around the state and around New York City, I hear we don't have enough workers, we don't have enough middle management, we don't have enough upper management, we need more young ownership. And with all the excitement around food, and Brooklyn seems to be the center of so much food interest today, how do we identify those pathways, and how do we talk about apprenticeships in a little different way? Because we need young people with technical skills for sure, but we need people in our food beverage industries, our craft food industries, and our processing plants who can work with their head as well as their hands. So when I look in grade school and the high school, it's hard to find the career paths that are going to take you to a job in the food system. I'm rambling a little bit here, but the food system is pretty large. It's about 47% of the jobs in the country are in the food system, whether research, blockchain technology, food safety, logistics, etc. So I wonder if you could speak to that just a little bit, about how we can better connect the dots and identify career paths for young people for jobs in the food system.
Do you want to work, Kinda? Either?
Well, as was referenced earlier, I think the community colleges is a place to start with sector-based training, in this case the food sector, where people who are not destined, young people who are not necessarily destined for four-year colleges can go and begin specified training in various areas of food service. As you well know, restaurants open in New York City every day. So there is a pathway, I think, for young people to obtain employment and understand the production of food not only as an issue of substance, but almost a cultural art making process. And I think if we can better have our community colleges reflect coursework as well as high schools. But I think the educational route is a key to that, because there is, I think, lots of employment opportunities for young people who have training in the food sector.
I would simply add to that apprenticeships are big there. I think it's an excellent way of training young people, and a lot of the food manufacturers in New York City are open to them. The other thing the last thing that I would add is there are a number of food incubators, and that's also been successful in training people and placing them after that in well-paying jobs.
We should say that Grow NYC, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which has played a lead role in connecting we in the city to good food from upstate, sometimes New Jersey tomatoes, but other than that, but we have, they are, Grow NYC is a member, is their executive director is a member of our regional council, so we're really very much in touch with this. If you look at our funding history over the last couple of years, not only you saw great performances today, which is has a woman-owned catering firm which has prides itself on bringing food from upstate New York, local food, et cetera. This is something that Liz Newmark has been pioneering for a number of years. We also have Fresh Direct, which we've invested in, a major new operation, expanded operation, which also has a direct connection with the upstate farm market, and I'm sure would be more than willing to convene something with you to talk about how we can maximize those benefits. Grow NYC has a new regional center that'll be opening in a couple years that'll give us more capacity to bring more food down from upstate. And of course, Wegmans opened in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and we know where they get their food from. So we've got a lot going on, all of which has a lot of support from our council.
Thank you.
Commissioner Destito?
I'm very impressed with your presentation, and thank you for bringing us up to speed on where a lot of your projects are. I'm really focusing on childcare, and I'm very impressed with what you've done with childcare. Can you just elaborate just a little bit more on, like, you have 5 boroughs, you have probably as diverse a need as anyone in upstate New York or anywhere around the state, how you are going to work at the child care issue in each of the diverse boroughs, because one is not the same as the other.
Yeah. Kathy, do you want to address that?
Well, I mean,
Sorry,
I want to
Kathy.
be honest about one thing, is that we're anxious to do something. There has not been a source of funding for the kind of research and technology we need to put in place to really both to map the child care system, to look at the specifics of how many people are underserved, what our additional needs are, and then to figure out how we're going to fill those gaps. So we really could use, and I'm not sure what the state has in mind or which agencies are really looking at.
There is a child care task force. Commissioner Reardon and Commissioner Poole from OCFS are working on it. I'm working on it a little bit, but because it's so tied to economic development. There are both spouses, partners, who are leaving the workforce because of child care issues.
Absolutely.
So we're losing, good people because they're rightfully so. Their priority is raising their children in a safe, quality, and affordable setting.
So it would be helpful to know from the task force what their recommendations are, how they're going to fit into the coming year's budget, because we're sort of frustrated at this point. We've kind of identified the projects we'd like to do. We don't see where the funding sources are to do the next step, which is basically finding out how we, measuring the gaps, figuring out what it's going to take to fill them, and then putting some new programs in place.
Thank you.
I just one more thing.
Yes.
One of the things I didn't say before, but that is very important, is we do think that some incentives in this area, whether it's tax credits or otherwise, that some incentives for employers in the private sector to do more would be really helpful.
It's good for you to say that. Thank you very much.
Say it often.
And say it often, please.
Deal.
Is that better? Yeah, thank you for a good presentation. I was going to go slightly off script from my usual housing question and ask a jobs question. You had some discussion in your materials about green jobs and having some roundtables. There's obviously a very big state and city agenda around greening the built environment. And so I wonder, and there's also an enormous amount of growth in the sort of retrofit jobs sector. So I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about strategies for recruiting and training people into that work, especially obviously people in the environmental justice sort of auspices in sort of more disadvantaged communities. So just sort of a little discussion about those jobs and some of your recruitments.
Well, obviously what's happening in terms of the new state mandates and city mandates around renewable energy and zero emissions is creating a fervor of interest in this area. So there's a lot of activity going on. 20 years ago we talked green jobs and sort of nothing came out of it. It was kind of double glazed windows or whatever. Now it's a whole different whole different issue where both organized labor is very interested in seeing how it fits into their strategic planning. The business community is looking at the same set of issues. So I think that that's going to be over the next couple of years. Now that this legislation is in place in the last year in both the city and the state, there are huge dollars associated with the investment that's going to be made private as well as public. So I think we're going to see a lot of activity on the infrastructure side and the big building side. Some of that will go to existing jobs, but the demands, I mean, New York City construction unions are at very high employment, so that's going to have to grow as well.
If I could add on, because I was going to ask a similar related question, just maybe to reemphasize with a couple of numbers, just exactly the situation you're highlighting, Kathy, because between the combination of the governor's initiatives at the statewide level to make New York a climate leader and the local law that passed, I would argue, New York City may be the global epicenter for what is developing the solutions that it's going to take to renovate the built environment to decarbonize over the coming decades. And some of the studies that are out there show that this will be a $20 billion retrofit market in New York, just in New York City. I'm not talking statewide. And that we will need 140,000 new workers in order to actually service that retrofit initiative. So I just want to really emphasize getting ahead of that so that we don't have a generational challenge, when we're in 2030 and headed for 2040, 2050 deadlines, and a real imperative for all of us to work together at the state and local level to make sure that we are getting prepared for that. And it's a huge opportunity because we know that New York will be a leader, but other places will follow, and the companies and businesses that are built to support this and to deliver and pioneer these solutions will start to find export markets. So to the extent that that's not already a high priority for the REDC, I'd certainly recommend that we talk about that heading into next year.
Great.
Everybody good? All right, New York City, thank you for coming and good luck.
Thank you very much.